The best ideas come from the people on the front line. The colleague called Glenn was working in West Brom and he used to be a watch repairer. He was basically doing watch repairs on his own and he thought he was going to get a real telling off. And now it's a £40 million a year business.
Your parents fostered over 90 children during your own childhood. What did growing up in an environment of seeing these kids come in for refuge into your family teach you?
What it taught me is the people I recruit into the business, I want people who have got a real reason to prove themselves and want to grab that second chance, because a lot of people have never given it to them in the past.
You stepped away from Timpson so that you could go and work for the government, looking at the prison system, which is so aligned to the values and the life that you've lived. From what you've seen outside of Timpson, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
Never fear a storm.
Be ready to adapt.
The skill is staying true to ourselves.
How are you?
Amazing.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to this conversation because I think if you asked every leader in this room whether they trust the people around them, they would most likely say that. In fact, we can do that. Let's start with a show of hands. Put your hands up if you believe that you trust the people in your organisation. I'd say that's 99%. Do you believe that it's 99%?
Not really, no.
Why?
Because the reason why organisations have lots of overhead and lots of structure and lots of compliance is because we don't trust people, or we can't trust people as much as we'd like to. And the nature of organisations is they have a lot of people checking.
So when it comes to trust, what does high performance look like for you?
For me, it's about trusting people. It's about having a culture where trust is the core element of how you operate. And that means that you recruit people who are fantastic and you trust them to get on with it and decide what they think is best. Because if you run the organisation to stop the 5% of the problem people doing what they do as bad actors, then the 95% of the people who are fantastic get tarred with the same brush and they're just restricted from being free and deciding how they should do things better.
And what happens if you restrict that freedom? Why is it so important?
Because if you restrict that freedom, what happens? One is you build up a lot of cost in the organisation because you need all these people checking and checking and checking. And then the second thing is you stop innovation. You stop people being able to make it up as they go along. And let me give you a small example. If you go into one of the Timpson shops and you ask for a certain key or a certain shoe to be repaired, and you say, well, I haven't got the money for that, or that's too much, or can you get me a different colour? The answer is always just yes. So we'll do deals, we'll order special items, we'll do things that lose us money. There's no rules about how that works, but just trust people to give great service and then you perform better. So it's a combination of basically trusting people is more fun and you end up making more money. So to me, those are two good reasons.
Can you give us an example, James, as well as that idea where your staff are free to barter and negotiate, of something that happens in a Timpson shop that would terrify most head offices?
Okay, first, we don't have staff, we have colleagues, because we don't like the word staff. It's a bit like sort of nails down a chalkboard for us. We don't believe anybody's more important than anybody else. That's why everyone's a colleague. Let me give you some examples. So stock. So most retail businesses have huge computer SAP systems deciding what stock should be in which shop on which day and have all these projections and so on. What we have is the colleague in the shop decides what they want. And if they get it wrong, they sort it out. So they literally walk around and say, I'll have 20 of those, 30 of those. I won't bother with any of those. And they learn what is the right stock for their shops. That's one example. Another is pricing. So our colleagues can decide what price they want to charge, as long as it's not above our we have sort of like a limit. But they can do deals. If we stop doing deals, we'd probably lose 20% of sales. But we even say you can give things away for free if you want. So 4% of our transactions are for free. And you may think that's commercially nuts, but actually it's commercially the most sensible thing that we do, because people remember kindness. They remember when someone has given them something for free, so they come back again and again and again.
And it's not just about making more money, right? It's also about what this does for a culture. So when you have a culture where, I think almost every culture would say, oh, we trust our people. But when you actually have a culture where the behaviours demonstrate the trust that you have in your people, what does it do for that culture?
What it does, it means the culture gets far more intense because colleagues stay. because they like the culture, because they're trusted in the culture. Most of our colleagues have worked in lots of other businesses where they haven't been trusted, they haven't felt that they are treated as an equal, and they haven't felt that they can be successful. So, it doesn't work out with everybody in our business. There are people who we don't think are right for us, and we ask them to find their happiness elsewhere. And some people leave in some way sort of firing us. But people stay a lot longer. Our colleague retention levels are off the chart compared to most retail businesses, our colleague turnover and so on. So people stay. And what that means is that we just give a better consistency of service.
So can I ask you about that period then? If somebody's come from outside of Timpson's and then they join and they're being told you're being trusted, and you said it can often take a while for that to happen. Is there a pattern that you see people go through until they really do understand that trust is being given?
Well, let me give you sort of a bit of an extreme example. So many people know we recruit people from prison. And what we try and do is the first day they join us, if they leave prison today, we want them starting working for us tomorrow, because every day that they're out of work is a problem. So the first thing we'll do is give them the money and say, could you go to the bank and put it in the bank? We trust you to put the money in the bank. And again, it's about building up the trust. But also what we find is the first 6 weeks when people join the business, they think it's all a bit strange because we're not checking on them. They can do what they want. They can go and have a break when they want. They can give things away for free. They can take things to the car for customers. There are no sort of rules. But also then what happens after that is that actually, yes, it's a business. We've got to perform. So we've got to get the sales in. We've got to get really good customer reviews and so on. So it is a balance between people sort of loving the freedom, but also we've got to be consistent and run a business.
I also think there's a really amazing message there in the fact that someone leaves prison, they come to work for you, and the first job you give them is to take cash to a bank. It almost feels like you've created a contract with them in that moment, haven't you?
And it's trust. It's showing them that we trust you. But you've got to earn that trust too by coming back with a receipt and working hard for the rest of the day.
So yesterday we had Chris Hoyt here talking about it, and he was talking about his terminal cancer diagnosis, and he spoke about the 2 o'clock in the morning when your brain starts projecting into a future that hasn't arrived and the terrors that come. So when I hear that you're giving a recently released prisoner a bag of cash and asking them to go to the bank, my brain goes to the future that hasn't arrived yet of what if they run off with it? What if they decide to abscond? Have you ever experienced any of these horror stories that our brains predict?
Well, I've recruited a lot of people from prison over the years, and I've recruited a lot of people who haven't been to prison over the years. And what I can tell you is there's no difference in their behaviour. When it goes wrong, whether they've been in prison or not.
Okay.
What I find is that people you recruit through the justice system, when it goes wrong, it can go wrong quite quickly and it all goes completely pear-shaped. But I believe in second chances, and I believe that when you trust people, they perform better.
And how do you stop the people that abuse the trust from changing your view on whether trust is the right way to run a business?
Okay, so everyone sort of looks at our culture from the outside and thinks we're very cuddly and everyone's nice to each other because, you get all these wonderful benefits and everything else. But if you're not good enough, you've got to find your happiness elsewhere. And the way we judge it is we want everyone to be a 9, every colleague to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10, because we only want to work with people who are amazing. And if someone's an 8, we'll give an opportunity to improve. But if they're less than an 8, sorry, not good enough for us. So when you recruit people, it's easy to spot a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 because their best is not good enough for us. They may be fantastic for somewhere else, but they're not right for us. The danger zone is 6 and 7s and 8s, because if you're desperate, if you've got vacancies and you just need to fill that gap, you will lower the standard of person you'll accept. And that's why you need HR departments. That's why you have tribunals, and that's where the problem zone is.
But you're using a scale. What is that scale based on?
Personality.
So what is an 8? Right.
And it's completely subjective. We want people who are fun, interesting, engaging, sparky, interesting. They look you in the eye. They've got something about them. I don't care whether they can repair a shoe, cut a key, develop a photo. That is irrelevant. I can teach skill. I can't teach personality.
So how do you go about assessing whether somebody's got the requisite personality?
Basically, we interview people. We'll interview anybody who turns up. A CV for us is basically a complete waste of time because you can't get your personality across in a CV. People sit in front of our area team, area managers, assistant area managers, and they'll ask questions around, where do you last go on holiday, what are your hobbies, tell me something about you. And you're just trying to suss out their personality. The thing is, within about 30 seconds, really. And then if we like their personality, we'll offer them a job.
And does it bother you if they're covered in tattoos, have blue hair, look a bit different to you or I would?
Well, if that was the case, about 95% of my colleagues would not pass the test, I think. No, we're not. What we're interested in is just that personality that is memorable.
Yeah. So you're almost looking for people that actually do look and seem a bit different. They bring something to the table.
Yeah, we want people who've just got that X factor of they can they're confident in their shop. They can command a personality of warmth and friendship and kindness in the shop.
I see how this works when you're hiring people to work in one of your stores. Does the same concept apply if you're looking for a really senior hire in the business, or do you suddenly change your rules of engagement at that point?
Well, two things. One is we don't really hire many senior roles from outside the business. We spend a lot of time on succession planning. Succession planning for me is probably the most important part of leadership.
Right.
So you've always got people lined up, ready to go. But whether you work in IT, finance, property, still want the same personality, because otherwise the culture doesn't work. You've got to have a really consistent kind of personality across the board.
Can we build back a bit into your own story? Because I think understanding this desire to give people second chances, to assess people on personality rather than sort of preconceptions is powerful. Your parents fostered over 90 children during your own childhood. What did growing up in an environment of seeing these kids come in for refuge into your family teach you?
Well, it was a chaotic time. I mean, my whole childhood, when you look back at now, literally, sometimes there would be 2 foster children, sometimes there would be 3, then someone would come back, then the parents would come and stay with us. So it was a madhouse, but it was a loving madhouse. And what it teaches you is that everybody has potential, but sometimes people are handicapped by the life that they've been given, the situations that they're in, whether they've been in the care system, whether they've got other issues. But everybody deserves a second chance. And my parents, my mum especially, that was her thing. She really believed in second chances. And I think what it taught me is the people I recruit into the business, I want people who have got a real reason to prove themselves and want to grab that second chance, because a lot of people have never given it to them in the past.
Do you remember how long it took you to learn to trust these young people that kept appearing in your life all the time?
It was, sometimes, if I look back now, it was quite a strange upbringing, really. But, we had some of the kids who came to live with us were amazing, like mates, good friends, used to come and play football all the time. Others were a complete nightmare. And basically they were a nightmare because they were damaged.
Yeah.
The holidays ruined, lots of shouting and storming off and that kind of stuff. But I think because we knew that they were always going to go, essentially, because they would come for us for a few weeks or a few months. In the end, some of them actually stayed with us for years. But you've got to make your mark, and they've got to come up with the goods as well. So I would say you build up, as a kid, it was more about friendship than trust. But they were great. Some of them were just very, very troubled.
And what would your mum and dad explain to you about why you have all these children appearing in your house? What did they teach you about love and care and empathy?
What my mum used to say is, well, their mum can't look after them, or their gran can't look after them, so that's what we're going to do. And it was about just love, about giving them love, not judging them. If they don't do the homework, didn't matter. If they didn't, if they weren't well behaved at school, didn't really matter. It was just giving them love.
Wow. And what about the conversation around the prison? Do you remember the first moment that you realised that there are prisons and they do have a system and it lets a lot of people down?
In some ways, it sort of started as a kid, because a lot of the foster children used to come to live with us because their mums were in prison. So my mum used to actually take the kids to see the mum in prison a lot, and we used to sit in the car park and wait outside. And then often the mums would come back and live with us, or come and stay with us, come and hang around for the days as part of their reintegration. And some of them were great. And I just sort of got the prison bug about wondering why these people are there. They must have done some really bad things for their kids to be taken away from them. And that's when I started to get the bug, I think.
Can you remember being sat in that car park then at Style Prison, and what was your experience as a kid? How did you perceive it?
these massive walls with barbed wire all over, and these people dressed in police officer uniform walking in and out the gate, and then the prison van coming from court. That was what I remember in my head.
Because we interviewed the comedian John Bishop, who told us, didn't he, about his dad went to prison, and what stuck with him through the rest of his life was the way that he felt people judged his mum when she went to visit him, judged him and his mother. So went to see his dad, he felt judged and looked down upon. So what was it that you were seeing from your own mum about these women that were coming and living with you or coming to visit their children? What was it that she was role modelling that you think you could still trace a direct line to your own leadership today?
One is don't judge people until you know them. And the other is everyone deserves a second chance. Because the reason why most women are in prison is because they're ill and they're victims. And most of these mums really just wanted to be with their kids. And if you separate the kids from the mums, you get this cycle of reoffending as well. So it was basically give people a chance, put your arm around the shoulder, give them some love, and hope for the best.
I really love this idea of your empathy and your understanding of other people being built when you were this, young kid, having to share your house with lots of different people every single passing month. Then obviously the day comes where it's time for you to be involved in the family business. Before you were in charge at Timpson, was this idea of taking people out of prison and giving them a job a thing? Was the upside down management system a thing? Was putting trust at the heart of the business a thing?
No, but it was a culture that was open to it. And it was a culture that was different from most businesses because it was essentially a family business culture, even though bizarrely for a period it wasn't a family business, it now is a family business. And it was quite paternalistic. So, we had a lot of people on the payroll who had been there a long time and had a difficult time when we kept them on. A lot of people who, we paid for operations, paid for holidays. Their kids couldn't get a job anywhere else, so they turned up working for us. It was that kind of culture.
Okay, so when you decided that you were going to make a change, what was the reaction? Was your dad was still involved in the business at this point?
Very much so, yeah.
Right.
Basically what happened is I started reading books and I was always a bit of a geek around learning from other companies. And I went to the States to go and see about 6 or 7 different businesses. I started being absolutely fascinated by Richard Sounds and Julian Richer and the way he ran the business. And I basically just wrote to loads of these business leaders to say, could I just come and sit with you for an hour and just ask you a load of questions how you run the business? And the businesses that I admired all did very similar things. They recruited great people. They really looked after them. They didn't judge them to be any different from anybody else. And they were just very much talking about a culture of kindness and looking after people. So I just sort of pulled all that together, copied it. I remember sitting down at the table with my dad saying, basically what happens is the most important people in our business and in every other business are the people who serve customers are on the front line.
Yeah.
And everyone else's job is to support them. But the problem is, you see it all the time, that in organizations, when people are paid more and more and more, they think they can tell people more and more and more. When actually, what their job is to support people more and more and more. And there's a business called Nordstrom in the States. There's a few others where they're just brilliant at doing this. And so we started, and I remember getting all the area managers in to a hotel for a sort of the big reveal. And I just said, right, from now on, everyone's a colleague. We don't use the word staff. It took about a year to get that word out of the culture. And that the most important people every day are the people who serve customers and put money in the till. Even if they started today, they are the kings and queens of the business. It's our job to help them. We cannot tell them what to do. And culture change takes a minimum of 3 years, probably 5, but we were on it all the time. Not all of the leaders got it, so they were replaced. And it got to the point where the more trust that they had in that leadership system, the better the business performed. Literally just got better and better and better.
But take us back to that table discussion with your dad, because you sort of present this idea to him, but you've also said it's a family business. There's also, like, your dad is like this warm paternal figure. How did you, what was his response when you pitch in this new way of working to him?
He was up for it. He's always been amazing with me. I think his view is, which is sort of, James is always going to come up with all these ideas. So the best way is to let him do it. And if it doesn't work, he'll learn his lesson. And, and not everything works, but this one did work. And actually, it made the business just more fun, and it made the business way more successful.
But did you pilot it somewhere first to get some evidence to present to him, or
No,
did he
just went
just let
for
you
it.
go?
Just went for it.
When did you first realise actually this is actually
Because what happened is sales started to go up.
right?
And then we bought another business, and they were very much a top-down business. And I remember going around, and we took a photo of me and my dad throwing bin bags into a skip to say, all the rules are done. Don't worry, this is this business we bought. All the rules are done. Just serve customers, do an amazing job, put the money in the till. Because we only have 2 rules in the business. Put the money in the till and look the part. So that's all you need to do. Sales went up 20% overnight. And then every business we kept buying, we kept doing the same thing. Forget the rules. Just serve customers, do an amazing job, give things away for free, do what you think is right. Sales go up 20%.
But you said some people didn't get it and had to move on. Like, what did that resistance look like? Was it overt or was it more subtle and insidious?
It's quite easy to spot. They love process. They have their favorites, and they don't like doing things in a way that is flexible. So they're sort of pretty rigid. And some of them probably are a bit pleased with themselves, because we got some colleagues who have amazing jobs and big money, and they've been with us a long, long time. And actually, the further you are away from the front line, the less power you have. But some people like to hold on to that power. In our world, that doesn't work.
How did you sort of address any issues of complacency that you might have seen?
I think probably because we know the business really well, and 2-3 days a week out and about visiting shops. And I always worry if you meet a retailer who, and I've done this a number of times before, they say, they say, I try and get around the shops on a Friday, which means probably 1 in every 3. Well, actually, that's the main part of the business. In our case, it's the main part of the business. So you've got to spend your time out and about, and that's how you get a real feel of how strong the culture is and how strong the standards are and how good the people are by getting out and about. You can't do that from the office.
So for people in this room and people who are listening to this podcast, what's the first thing that you would like them to do after this conversation to create their own version of upside down management?
If you were to spend 5 hours or a day with 3 colleagues who work on the front line all the time and ask them, if they had a magic wand, what are the things that you would do as a leader to help them to do their job better and to serve customers better and to make more money? They would give you a long list of things, often pretty easy fixes, and basically just do that.
That's it.
That's it. The best ideas come from the people on the front line. If I want to know how to improve how it works in the warehouse, I don't, with the greatest respect to McKinsey, I don't get McKinsey in. I'll go and speak to Julie and Dave and Brian, who work in the warehouse, over a cup of tea and a sandwich, and they'll tell me what needs to be done.
And how do you avoid the idea then of, like, when you turn up in an organisation, people tell you what they think you want to hear rather than what you need to hear? Because I can imagine that can be a danger for people in many cultures.
Yeah, I think because we know the business well, there is an element of trust that we built up, and we know the people, and they tell it straight. Our culture is an honest culture. It's not a political culture, and I think that helps. That's I think my bullshit radar is pretty good.
So can you give us an example then of a piece of feedback that you've had from going and speaking to Dave in the warehouse that has really sort of made you stop, reflect, and do something significantly different?
I'll give you one example. We do watch repairs in the Timpson shops. It's actually the second biggest service that we do now. And the reason why we did it is the colleague called Glenn was working in West Brom, and he used to be a watch repairer. He was working in the Timpson shop. In those days, we just did shoe repairs and keys and pet tags. And this business wasn't very good in West Brom. In fact, it's still not very good in West Brom. But he was basically doing watch repairs on his own, but ringing it through on the key cutting button on the till. And I walked in there and saw him doing it. I said, "What are you doing?" And he thought he was going to get a real telling off. And he said, "Well, I'm just doing a bit of watch repairs because business is slow." So this is brilliant. So he then started, I said, "Please do more." And then we started getting other colleagues into the shop to learn how to do watch repairs. And then he ended up basically running our watch repair business. And now it's a £40 million a year business. So if it wasn't for Glenn, just having a go, it wouldn't have worked.
So again, the trust gave Glenn the freedom. Glenn makes a lot of money for your business now.
Yep, it works. I'll give you another example the other way. I have a colleague who loves cats. In fact, he's just retired. And we do cat and dog tags. And he said, we will sell so many collars. We need to be selling collars as well as tags. I said, fine, go to Pets at Home, go and buy as many collars as you want, put them in the shop, sell them for about 20% less than Pets at Home sell them for. If we take a loss, it doesn't matter. Let's see what happens. So I phoned him up a couple of weeks later. So how many have you sold? He said, three cat ones. One to his mum. He'd bought one with his colleague discount, and a genuine customer had actually bought one.
And your reaction to that, to make sure that he continues to be ambitious and try things?
Keep selling as many collars as you want. But I said, when we get to a point where you're selling so many you can't cope, then we'll look at putting them in other shops. We never did.
See, what I find amazing though is like you've offered two examples there, like Glenn doing the watch repairs and your colleague that loves cats. I think there's something really special about that level of detail that you get, that you or your managers get to know colleagues. How do you go about creating that kind of level of detail of understanding?
I believe the best way to lead an organisation is to operate here and here. For those of you who are listening, it's high and low. So you operate at the boardroom level and on the front line. And I don't really bother about the middle bit. It's not that I don't value what the middle teams do. It's just, but I trust them to get on with it. But you have to know what is going on the front line, and you have to know what is going on strategically and investment-wise in the boardroom. And that is where, for me, the focus needs to be. And that's what I really try and do. And sometimes you see people, they're far more comfortable in the middle zone. It doesn't work.
I was hoping you were going to talk to us about what you told me many years ago, the Coronation Street test that you got your managers to do, of starting to ask them personal questions and get your managers to understand that you valued that information. It wasn't just gossip.
That's what we call the Do You Know Your People test.
Yeah.
So every year we get our area managers together and we'll do all the normal sort of updates and go and have fun and everything. And then we have the Do You Know People test. So what we do is we randomly pick a colleague who works for them, and they normally have 50, 60 colleagues, and we'll phone them up a week before and say, right, you need to answer these questions. Where do you live? How many kids have you got? What are their names? What are your hobbies? Where do you last go on holiday? Which sports team do you follow? And what's your favourite kind of music or something like that? And then it's like an exam. So then the area managers come in and we say, right, these are the questions about Tracy. And if they don't get 80%, we have a real problem with that, because they need to know their people. If you're going to be a great leader, you need to know your people, not just how they perform or their qualifications as individuals.
And you've also hired a long time ago, I mean, it's all trendy now to have head of happiness or chief happiness officer or whatever, but you created the director of happiness role.
I think we were the first. Yeah, Janet. Janet is our director of happiness. And ironically, she spends most of her time with people who are unhappy. But so the way we work out the health of the business is by how happy our colleagues are. And you may think that is really, just head in the sky kind of stuff. I'm really commercial. I'm as commercial as anybody you will ever meet. And I've worked out that if your colleagues are really happy, you're going to perform well. And the happier they are, the more money we make. There is a direct correlation between the average level of happiness and the profit of the business. So that's why Janet's role as director of happiness and the team she has around her is absolutely vital, because we measure how happy everybody is. So,
how often?
So we do it on a Thursday night, every Thursday. Quick question is, how are you feeling out of 10? Average is around about 8.9 normally across the business. And then we have the annual happy index, which is how do you rate your boss out of 10? So your area manager, your team leader. And that is like A-level results day when that comes through. Because if a leader scores badly, it's pretty terminal. It's their job to ensure that their colleagues are happy. And that doesn't mean you're a pushover. It doesn't mean you give everybody whatever they want, but it means you are a great leader. You know them, you are kind to them, you are as flexible as possible around their lifestyle, and you are honest with them. And that's how we run the business. It's more about happiness than it is about profit.
But what if that leader turns around to you and says, 20% growth in my stores this year? Like, I'm the most successful manager in the country.
Not important. If their colleagues, but what you find is the happier the colleagues, the better they perform anyway.
Yeah.
So you can have someone who comes in and sort of just smashes the sales and short-term fix doesn't work because their colleagues know.
The idea of happiness can sound quite abstract. If you were to break down what does make a colleague happy, what have you found out the factors are?
I would say that they're trusted to get on with it. They're left alone. If they've got a problem, they can phone up and it's dealt with, because a lot of them have worked in organisations where you phone up and asking and nothing ever happens. For us, it has to happen all the time. We're flexible around their lifestyles, and we are really kind to them. So if they have a problem, we'll lend them money. We'll give them a dreams come true. I think something like 28% of our colleagues have had a dream come true. So
Go on, explain what that is.
So I think last year we spent something like 1.6 million on making colleagues' dreams come true. So you may think, again, if we're a private business, we can do it. If it's a PLC, it's different. I understand that, but I'd still think it's probably a sensible way of doing things. So basically, colleagues write to the dream team. The dream team is actually Martine, who used to be my PA many years ago, and it'll be a request. And when we first started it, I was a bit nervous. In fact, this was an idea I copied off Richer Sounds. I was a bit nervous because I thought I want to go to Tenerife with my mates or a set of golf clubs or something like that. But actually, it's the kids have had a really difficult time. Can we take them on holiday? The boiler's gone. I can't afford a new boiler. I can't afford a car. I'd love to get the garden done up. Stair lifts so mum and dad can come and live with us. We do a lot of teeth. And that kind of thing. So the sort of thing where they wouldn't be able to necessarily afford it. But again, we love doing it. We're a family business. They are part of our family, and you look after your family.
So what's your criteria to then decide whether your dream will come true? How does Martine determine?
Are they a great colleague? Are they a 9 or a 10 out of 10? We employ a lot of people from prison, and a lot of people from prison have had serious drug addiction issues in the past, so their teeth aren't good. And I can't tell you the number of times where they write in their dream letter and they're asking for new teeth because they can't smile in front of their grandchildren.
Yeah.
Because they're embarrassed and they can't smile in front of customers.
And giving them that confidence.
Yeah.
That self-belief. You mentioned there we're flexible around their lifestyle. And I worked for a company that told me they were flexible around my lifestyle. And it was like, sometimes they might let you leave half an hour early if it's for a really extreme circumstance. What does flexible around your lifestyle actually look like when it comes to best practice?
So if you come to Timpson House, that's our head office, we don't call it head office, Timpson House in Manchester, and you have the days when the teachers are on strike, the place is just full of kids. It's full of dogs, it's full of kids, people's grandparents come in, and then when it comes to working in a shop, if you need to, I need to go medical appointment on Thursday, fine, no worries, we'll cover it. And what you'll find is leaders, area managers will actually cover shops for colleagues and come in on their day off so their colleagues can have a day off.
Wow.
And I'm interested then from a commercial point of view, you said you can correlate happiness with profit and productivity. What is it that you've seen? Can you explain?
So we add up the Happy Index scores.
Yeah.
The survey's done every April. They get the scores in June. And some area managers will literally have every one of their colleagues giving them a 10 out of 10 as a leader. And you'll have others and we also look at the return rate as well, because the return rate is actually really, really important. And then we have an overall average, and we plot that against the profit of the company. And if the average happiness goes down, literally you'll see the profit go down.
And can you give us like specific percentages of like what is 1 point in a happiness index?
Last year they were up 1.6%, and profit was up about 4 million quid.
So can we talk about what your ambitions look like for the future? Because I think one of the things that's interesting, and I told a friend of mine who runs a very big business that we were having a conversation today and it was all about happiness. And interestingly, his reaction straight away was, the problem is the more you give your staff, the more they want. Which I think gives you an insight into the culture that he's maybe creating at his business. Hence, I'm not using his name or his business, right? But this is a real thing where you're now known for this. So what do you do to keep on growing in this area, like to be ambitious, to be creative? Like what are the things that you have to keep on doing to push the boundaries?
Well, we're always looking for new ideas
Yeah.
and you get the best ideas from what other people are doing. And you try them, and if it works, you just keep on doing it. But I would say, just go back to your point on, why do you do it? Because people want to feel secure. You have a great job now. You know what you do. You feel secure. A lot of people don't feel secure in their lives and their jobs. And working for an organisation that values them, looks after them, gives a huge amount of security to them. So when it comes to other ideas, I mean, obviously, when I go back to running the business after I've done this job in the government, I'll need to sort of get my thinking cap back on. But it's about recognising you need to keep doing more and more and more for the colleagues on the front line. And it's going to be interesting with technology, because what technology is going to be able to do is to speed up a lot of things. But we're in the business of service and people serving people. And so we need to make sure that we maintain the culture when the way business works changes quite quickly. And that's going to be an interesting challenge.
This isn't a political conversation, and that's not where we want to take it. But it is interesting that for people that don't know, you stepped away from Timpson so that you could go and work for the government, looking at the prison system, which is so aligned to the values and the life that you've lived. But I think it's probably also given you a really interesting insight into the general state of the nation when it comes to trust and it comes to care and empathy and understanding. So are you, from what you've seen outside of Timpson, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I'm an eternal optimist. What I've seen in the last 2 years doing my job is that the way I've run the business correlates exactly to how I've run prisons and probation and turned it around. The focus on listening to the people on the front line, you get the best ideas all the time. Measuring things, I'm really hot on performance and the business culture of just drilling into the data. I've done a lot of that. Also kindness. And it's a big organisation. I'm leading at the moment, but I still write letters all the time, thanking people, congratulating people. So a lot of the values that I've learned in the Timpson business, I've tried to replicate here. But it's way more complex. It is way more complex. And, it's been fascinating. I think when I first started, the first 3 months were like a traumatic experience in my life, understanding it all. And it's like doing an A-level every week. But I am hopeful. There are a lot of very good people. There are a lot of people who are delivering a service, public service, and work incredibly hard. I've loved working with these people. They're really inspirational people, very clever.
It's a real validation as well of the things that you've put in place. If you can take it away from your business, take it into the public sector, and it's also successful there. So what is the thing that you learned in your life running Timpson that you took into the prison service and has had the biggest effect, or the thing that you are really proud of that you took into that world that wasn't there before?
A belief that good performance is possible, because when I started this job 2 years ago, everyone's heads were down. Everything was poor. If you looked at all of the data, everything was down, 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 down. Now 90% of my probation areas are performing up. 75% of my prisons are performing up. And literally 2 years ago, it was completely the other way around. And that's because we've been on performance, but also listening to the people who are doing the job. And they know the answers.
And to flip Jake's question, what have you seen from your current role that you will take back into Timpson?
They're very good at thinking things through. I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, fine, let's have a go. In government, you can't do that. So it's thinking through not just the next steps, but the third and the fourth step. I think that is something that I will take back very much. And sort of unintended consequences, which, again, private business, if it doesn't work, oh well. Where in this, if it doesn't work, is a big problem. So I think probably being more thoughtful about decisions and the implications of those decisions. And
what has it done for you as a leader to actually step away and have perspective on something that you've been so central to for so long?
It's been a challenge that I don't think many people wanted to do, or anybody else really wanted to do. I feel tested. I feel pleased that a lot of the things that I hope would work have worked. I feel that I've learned a lot. I've met some amazing people. It's been difficult and hard a lot of the time. But I think that I'm really proud of what we've done. And there's a phrase, there's a film, Nanny McPhee, yeah. Which is, if you need me but don't want me, I'll be there. And if you want me but don't need me, I'll be gone. And I want to get to a point where they're on their way, it's robust, and it's, they will keep the good work going.
That's lovely. If you need me but don't want me, I'll be there. If you want me but don't need me, I'll be gone. Yeah. We've got some quick-fire questions to finish up with. The 3 non-negotiables that you think are most important as a leader.
Kindness, writing letters, getting on with it fast.
What's the single best piece of advice you've ever received and why?
I would say the single best piece of advice I ever received from my wife, you can only do so much in a day.
What's your biggest strength?
Quick decision-making, even though I may get it wrong.
And your greatest weakness?
I give people a second chance and sometimes a third and a fourth and a fifth.
What advice would you give to a young James?
I think when I was younger, I was so ambitious and loved business and wanted, I kept reading the papers about all these, Lord Hanson in those days and Gerald Ronson and all this sort of stuff. And then when you get to this point where you're actually running this big business, you still think there's more and more and more. So I would say just take every day one step forward and don't try and jump too far every day.
If you could go back to one moment of your life, what would it be and why?
The day I met my wife in the library at university, because that was probably the most important thing that happened in my life.
It's beautiful. And finally, what does high performance mean to you that you'd love to leave people thinking about?
It's about being the best you can be by every day a step forward. Every day a step forward. Every day a step forward.
I love that. Listen, it's been a really, really fascinating conversation. Final question before we wrap up. We're told all the time that the world is becoming less kind, less kind, less kind. From your lived experience, do you agree with that? And if you do you believe that us as individuals can make the world a kinder place?
I think we can all make the world a kinder place. I think there is so much kindness around the world. There's so much kindness in communities. You see it on the street, you see it everywhere. There's, in our village where we live up in Cheshire, how people look after the old people in the village, and it's fantastic. But I don't think we're very good at telling the story, and that makes people feel it's less kind. But I do think as human beings, we want people to be kind to us, and we benefit hugely when we're kind to others.
James Timpson, thank you very much indeed.